Daniel sat in his leather armchair, bathed in the soft glow of the lamp beside him, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards as the night settled in. Sarah's phone, carelessly placed on the coffee table, vibrated. The screen lighting up in the dim room. "Ain't wait for tonight, love." The message flashed for a moment before disappearing into the notifications bar. Daniel's grip on the glass tightened, but his face remained unreadable. No sharp intake of breath, no sudden movements, just the stillness of a man who had just had the ground beneath him shift, yet chose to remain standing. He set his drink down and reached for the phone, his fingers hovering over the screen. The temptation to unlock it, to see the full conversation, was overwhelming, but he resisted. Not yet. Instead, he leaned back, letting the pieces start assembling in his mind. Sarah walked into the room, heels clicking softly against the wooden floor. She was stunning as always, long dark hair falling in loose waves over her shoulders, makeup flawless, her dress hugging her body in a way that once made him proud. Now it only fueled his quiet rage. "Hey, babe," she said, leaning down to press a soft kiss on his cheek, her perfume lingering in the air. "I'm heading out for a bit. Girls' night." Daniel forced a smile, his expression betraying nothing. "Sounds fun. Don't stay out too late." She grinned. No promises, and just like that, she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, and Daniel exhaled slowly, setting his whiskey down with deliberate care. His heartbeat was steady, his mind already working through the necessary steps. He waited until her car pulled out of the driveway before picking up her phone again. It was locked, of course, but Sarah was nothing if not predictable. A few seconds later, he typed in their wedding anniversary, her go-to passcode for everything. The phone unlocked with a quiet click. What he found wasn't just an affair. It was an entirely separate life. Different email addresses, a second bank account, a lease agreement for an apartment across town, photos, videos. A life meticulously curated outside of their marriage. Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line as he scrolled through the evidence of her deception, feeling not heartbreak, but something colder, something sharper. Sarah believed she was untouchable. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. Daniel sat motionless, the glow of the phone screen illuminating his face in the dim room. His pulse was steady, his breathing even, but inside his mind was a machine clicking into high gear. He scrolled through Sarah's messages, each one confirming what he already knew. His wife wasn't just unfaithful. She had built a second existence carefully balanced on deception. He saw messages exchanged at odd hours, payments made for dinners, hotel stays, and gifts. But what caught his attention the most was the lease agreement for an apartment. Her sanctuary away from their shared life. An address he hadn't known about. A space he had never stepped into. That's where the answers were. With the precision of a surgeon, Daniel took screenshots, forwarded emails to himself, and noted every detail. He wasn't just gathering proof, he was assembling the foundation for what came next. Sarah thought she was in control. She had no idea she had just become the subject of his most meticulous project. The next morning, he followed the familiar rhythm of their routine. Breakfast was made, coffee brewed. When Sarah walked into the kitchen, freshly showered and humming to herself, he greeted her with a warm smile, as if nothing had changed. "You up early?" she said, leaning in for a kiss. "Couldn't sleep," he replied smoothly. "Too much on my mind." She laughed lightly, oblivious. "Don't overwork yourself, babe." Daniel only nodded, watching her sip her coffee. She had no idea she was standing in the wreckage of her own making. By midday, he was parked across the street from the address he had memorized the night before. The apartment building was modern, sleekly expensive for her salary alone. How long had she been funneling their money into this? How many lies had she spun to sustain her little secret? A few hours later, Sarah arrived. She stepped out of her car, checking her reflection in the side mirror, adjusting her lipstick. It was a simple movement, something he had seen her do countless times before, but now it felt theatrical, like watching a character play their part in a story they thought they controlled. She entered the building without hesitation. Daniel leaned back in his seat, eyes cold, calculating. He wasn't going to barge in. He wasn't going to scream or confront her. That wasn't his way. No, he would watch, learn, plan, and when the time was right, he would strike. Daniel sat in his car, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm against the steering wheel as he watched the entrance of Sarah's secret apartment building. He had followed her here for the third time in a week, each visit confirming what he already knew. This wasn't just a fling. It was a second life, a life she had built with careful lies while coming home to him as if nothing had changed. He had expected anger, maybe even heartbreak. Instead, all he felt was a cold, simmering satisfaction. She thought she was untouchable. She thought wrong. Earlier that morning, Daniel had begun phase 2 of his plan. While Sarah slept soundly beside him, her body curled toward his as if she wasn't betraying him in every possible way, he had made a few key moves. First, he secured their finances, quietly shifting money into a private account she didn't know existed, freezing shared assets, and ensuring that by the time she realized something was wrong, she would have nothing left to stand on. Then, he called his lawyer. Divorce? The man had asked, his voice even. Or something more strategic? Daniel smiled at the question. He had chosen his lawyer for a reason. Not yet, he replied. I wanted to fall apart first. And now, sitting outside her apartment, he watched and waited. At 6:15 p.m., John arrived. He pulled up in a sleek black car, stepping out with the self-assured arrogance of a man who believed he was winning, well-dressed, well-groomed, every bit the polished executive type. Daniel smirked. John had no idea he had already been introduced to Daniel, just not in the way he would have wanted. 2 days ago, Daniel had reached out using a burner phone, sending John a simple text. You might want to ask Sarah about her husband. Then he let the tension build. Now, as John walked toward the building, Daniel noted the stiffness in his movements, the way his hand hovered near his pocket, probably checking his phone, debating whether or not to confront her. Sarah had built this illusion that she was in control, that she had mastered the art of deception. But deception was a fragile thing, easily shattered with the right push. Daniel decided to give them a little more time, let her reassure John, lie through her teeth, promise him that everything was fine. Then he would set the real plan in motion. An hour later, Sarah's apartment lights flicked off. Daniel smiled to himself as he started his car. Tomorrow, he would send Sarah's friends in her secret life a few carefully selected messages, screenshots, proof that the woman they knew wasn't who she claimed to be. By the end of the week, she wouldn't have just lost John. She'd have lost everything, and she wouldn't even see it coming. The trap was set, now it was only a matter of time. Daniel moved through the next few days as if nothing had changed, carrying on the act just as Sarah had done for months. Smiling when needed, responding when expected, hiding the truth beneath a carefully maintained exterior. The difference was, his deception was calculated. Sarah's was reckless. By midweek, the first cracks in her double life began to show. It started with John. Daniel had waited until late at night when he knew Sarah would be asleep beside him before sending the next message. Still think you know the woman in your bed? Check your email. The attached file contained a neatly compiled folder of texts, emails, and financial transactions linking Sarah's name to their shared bank accounts, proving beyond doubt that she wasn't just cheating on her husband. She was funding their affair with money Daniel had earned. John, the self-serving coward that he was, wasted no time. The next morning, Daniel watched from his car as John stormed into Sarah's apartment, his face tight with fury. They argued. Loudly. Sarah's voice was frantic, pleading, but John wasn't listening. He left the apartment in a rage, slamming the door behind him. Sarah followed, trying to pull him back, her perfectly crafted world slipping through her fingers. Daniel smirked. One down, but that was only the beginning. The next phase was more public, more humiliating. Daniel had spent the past week compiling messages and photos evidence of Sarah's deception. He sent them anonymously to her friends in her second life, the people who had known her only as an independent, unattached woman. The fallout was instant. By the evening, Sarah's phone was buzzing nonstop. Sarah, what the hell? Were you really married this whole time? Did you lie to all of us? One by one, her friends cut ties. The people she had confided in, built trust with, they vanished, leaving her in isolation. And so, isolation, she had crafted a reality where she believed she was untouchable. But now, standing in the ruins of her lies, she was completely alone. And Daniel wasn't done yet. That night, as she sat in silence, her world burning around her, Daniel simply placed one final piece of paper on the kitchen table, a single note. Game over. Tomorrow she would wake up to a life that no longer belonged to her. And Daniel, he would walk away, free. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she stared at the note. Game over. 2 words. Simple and final. She reached for her phone, but the screen was filled with unread messages, her second life collapsing in real time. John had blocked her. Her so-called friends wanted nothing to do with her. The notifications stopped coming, leaving only silence. Her hands moved to her laptop. Maybe she could salvage this, find some way to fix the damage. She tried logging into their shared bank account. Denied. Her credit card? Frozen. Panic clawed at her throat. Daniel, she jumped to her feet, searching the house, calling his name. The bedroom closet, empty. His desk, cleaned out. She ran to the garage, her breath catching. His car was gone. It wasn't just that he had left, he had erased himself from this life. Sarah's stomach twisted. She had played with fire, convinced she was untouchable, but Daniel had been watching, waiting, and now he had burned everything down around her. She sat down on the bed, trying to steady herself, but the weight of it all crashed down at once. John was gone. Her friends were gone. Her money was gone. Daniel was gone. A sob broke from her lips, raw and desperate. How had this happened? She had been so careful, so sure she was in control. But Daniel had never confronted her, never screamed, never broken down. He had simply waited for her to destroy herself. And now there was nothing left. She dialed his number, praying he would answer. Disconnected. Tears blurred her vision as she tried again. Still nothing. For the first time in years, Sarah felt small, weak, powerless. She had built two lives, thinking she could juggle them both, but she had underestimated the one man who knew her better than anyone. The man she thought she had fooled. Daniel hadn't just caught her. He had outplayed her. The realization sank in. Heavy and undeniable, she had lost everything. And Daniel? Somewhere far away beyond the wreckage of their marriage, he was starting over. Free. Sarah clutched the note in her shaking hands, reading the words again. Game over. This time, she understood exactly what they meant.